I love this car. Anything negative that I'm saying about it, don't get confused. Like, I absolutely do love this car. Good morning, big meathead. Do you like the morning or no? You like the morning? Oh, that's how I feel too. Some days, I guess you're 2 hours early to the airport, plenty of time to go through pre-check, and you catch your plane in plenty of time. And I guess some days you are running into the airport, hoping that the plane doesn't take off without you. Guess what kind of day this is? Something that I found crazy is, like, I used to have this big fear of talking in front of a camera. Now, in a crowd of people, don't give a shit. But the weird thing is, as the years have gone on, it's become more and more normal to be walking through an airport talking to a camera. So this is the new normal now. By the way, completely a sweatpants short kind of day. Those exist. You're welcome. So we just touched down in Nashville. Can't hear myself talk. But he said he's out front with the Challenger, so we're gonna go and try and find our way out of here. All right, guys, so we are behind the wheel of a car that, as a GM fanatic, I can appreciate all cars. I didn't think I was going to have this much fun behind the wheel. I'm going to explain to you how this SRT Challenger has really changed my outlook on the Mopar performance scene that I already respected but couldn't get into for myself, and how this car might have just wormed its way to be one of my favorite cars on the road. It's shocked me in so many ways. Thank you, by the way, for all the likes and subscriptions. You guys have been killing it, so I appreciate you guys for helping me live out my dreams here. Let's talk about this $300 SRT Challenger. I'm all the way out in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a far cry from my home state of Delaware. Why am I out here? Well, this weekend, Streetcar Takeover is in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and Nashville just so happens to be the closest airport. It's about an hour drive away. What happened is I flew out here super early, ended up renting this 392 SRT Dodge Challenger. I've driven a couple Dodge pickup trucks, but I've never driven a Dodge sports car, and I've actually kind of honestly always had a little bit of a crush on these things. So I'm gonna see if this thing can live up to the hype or if it's a disappointment. When I like to do car reviews, I like to take the chance to really get to know the car. I have done a couple where it was like, you know, an hour, 2 hours of driving the car, and how well can you really give your opinion on a vehicle? What good is it for a really just like a first impression if you're thinking about buying the car for yourself? So I basically spent a long weekend with the car, Friday through Sunday, and I got the opportunity to do everything that I normally do except with this car. Lugging around my camera equipment. I got lost in Nashville. I actually just stopped to take a couple shots of the car outside of Nissan Stadium, ironically enough. I'm driving and driving aimlessly, kind of, because I figured I would run into, like, you know, McDonald's or something. But it turns out that I went in the direction where there's absolutely nothing and I have to pee so bad. Dude, what is this? I think I ended up in like a park or something. Parks should have porta potties, right? There's people golfing here. I don't think it'd be appropriate to show on camera, but I just pulled up to this porta potty, and to my left there's a park with a bunch of people in it. Some little kid, maybe 3, 4 years old, literally just pulled his pants down and he's pissing in this park full of people. Why do I feel like that's me as a 3-year-old? I think that if I did that, it would probably be frowned on, so I'm gonna elect to go with the porta potty. And my favorite part is this car was even with me as I struggled to get out of my hotel room at the last second and try to be on time. Let's talk about the basics first. The thing about the Challenger is they have so many different variants of this car, especially today, that your head head will go in circles trying to figure it out. Some of the trim levels really don't have very much differentiation in between them. So I am not going to sit here and run down all the different comparisons of all the trim levels. That I'm just going to be giving you my honest review of the 2014 SRT with the 392 under the hood. What I did find with these cars is that even though there are a lot of configurations for the 2014 model year, this was before the Hellcat and the Demon, of course. You had 3 engine configurations: the V6 5.7 liter Hemi, which I think came with the RT, the SRT8 with the 392. It's a 6.4 liter that makes almost 500 horsepower. I think it makes about 470 to be a little bit more exact. Kind of getting my day going, so I wanted to grab coffee and I plugged Dunkin' Donuts into my GPS. This is just a PSA for Dunkin' Donuts. This took me to one of those bullshit Dunkin' Donuts express locations that shouldn't exist. Like, just stop with those, because every time I plug in Dunkin' Donuts on my GPS and it takes me to some bullshit where I have to make my own coffee and the coffee's getting old for all day, I don't want it. Like, stop making Dunkin' Donuts express, you cheap coffee. Aside from that, in terms of going fast, this car does come with standard launch control, which I found to be also a pretty cool feature. Even though with the configuration that it's set up in, I don't know, it seems kind of pointless. It seems like something that's kind of fun to play with. I don't know how good it is at working. It is pretty easy to use, but come on, dude, get off the fucking road. See how you make your damn turn with your piece of shit jalopy. So when driving this car, I kind of found that it's like really different from a lot of cars that I've driven. It's definitely not a Corvette, which I was very used to. It's a lot bigger. You have a lot more space in the cabin. Maybe a more comparable car that I've been behind the wheel of was like a 07-ish GT500, which felt a lot more lumbering than this car. It's actually surprisingly nimble for all of the memes that go around about how fat these cars are. And I feel almost like the weight works in the car's advantage because it gives you a smoother ride. This is going to sound weird, but bear with me for a minute here. It's almost like with one of these cars, you can drive it and forget that you're driving a high-performance vehicle. Please don't let this be a cop behind me. Please don't let this be a cop behind me. Please don't let this be a cop behind me. And you're rolling. I know that people say, oh, I want the loudest car possible. It wouldn't annoy me. Don't even need a radio because I can listen to my exhaust. No, that's stupid. Like, you need a radio, you need creature comforts if you're going to be driving around the car on any sort of regular basis. But in this car, you can kind of just get lost with how comfortable it is. Seats, they're great. They're very comfortable. They're very supportive. So if you decide, you want to throw it in the corners a little bit, they seem like good seats. They're stiff and comfortable, not to mention that they're both heated and cooled. This is one of the advantages of being able to spend a lot of time with a car, is on the way from Nashville to Bowling Green, I got a severe case of swamp ass, but I was screwing around with the controls, and I did decipher the idea that you can actually put on these vented seats and they draw the swamp ass straight through the seat. I don't know where they keep it, but it makes it go away. This car is actually so smooth when you drive it that speed really sneaks up on you. You could just be rolling down the highway, which I was doing on the way here, just enjoying myself, not trying to speed, and I look down and I'm doing allegedly 90 miles an hour, maybe a little bit more, and it's like the car's not even trying and the suspension is just flowing on the highway. On top of that, in terms of it being a drivable and enjoyable car, it has a kick-ass stereo system. Harman Kardon, I guess it is. I have one of their speakers in my house, the Bluetooth unit. It's also awesome in case you're looking for the best Bluetooth speaker you could possibly buy. It's incredible, and they continue the quality in this car. The system is just amazing. It's loud. It has just the right amount of bass as to not overwhelm everything, but also to keep you into the music. You are hitchhiking and I am not stopping to give you a ride. The stereo itself is so loud that it actually shakes. I don't know if it's just this car or if this happens to other Dodge products, but there's a panel connected somewhere up here on the dashboard that shakes when you turn it up too loud. So like maybe the radio is a little bit better than the build quality of the car will support, but I guess that's just a tiny little issue. It's not necessarily a make or break, at least for me. I know people get really picky about that stuff though. And the head unit here, the first thing I was originally planning on saying is I wouldn't give this car to my dad, who is 66 years old, and expect him to figure out how to use this head unit, because there are just so many options and buttons and stuff like that that you could push. But after using it for a while, you know, it's pretty straightforward. It's very easy to see this stuff, which I wouldn't normally say, but I was just thinking about my dad trying to use it. And you can control pretty much everything from the head unit that you need to. Media, all your controls for your seats, climate controls, nav, your phone, and then the SRT pages or race pages or whatever the hell they call it, you can use to actually adjust some of the different settings in the car's suspension and steering, and it's pretty neat. I'm gonna get into that in a second, because that's actually another really cool feature that I really like about this car. Speaking of my dad, the one thing I told him before I left, I was like, hey, I'm gonna be renting this Challenger when I go out there. I'm kind of excited. And the thing that he says, this is just the way my dad is he goes, make sure that you say something about the cup holders. Okay, Dad. It does have the double cup holder right here, which actually is a pretty good point to make about this car, because it absolutely sucks driving a stick shift and trying to have cups here. With just my one cup, it wasn't too bad, because I could like loop my arm around it. But if you wanted to do any type of serious driving with this thing, it would definitely be an inconvenience. They do also have the cup holders down here in the door, which you want to put a bottle in. And my Bonneville actually had those same style cup holders, and I can't tell you how many times I just didn't think about it and ended up having drinks go all over the inside of my car. Two of the standard like large size cups won't fit in here without popping each other's lids off. We're gonna have to haul ass on the highway, because I am going to be late for my flight. Good job, Jesse. We'd always cram 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-minute bag. So while we're sitting here in the drive-thru, I might as well take this opportunity to explain to you a little bit about this interior and what I think of all that, because if there's one thing about American cars that people cannot seem to get over, which I kind of in recent years think has gone away, is the quality of the interior. First of all, I have to say that the design and layout is awesome. With the way that the center console comes up on the right-hand side, you kind of get this like cockpit feeling going on, and the gauges and displays are absolutely beautiful. These mechanical gauges probably won't do you very much good, to be honest. They're kind of difficult to read, but they're very cool looking, and I have to say that I haven't really looked at them, at least the mile per hour one, at all really since I have been driving it. But there's a big mile per hour digital display in the middle. The fuel and temperature are also digital, and then the RPM actually isn't bad. The numbers are bigger, and you can kind of, because you don't want to be staring at the gauge cluster, so you can kind of just glance at that and get an idea of where that is. The driving position in this car is also really awesome. When you have something like a Corvette, you really feel like you're a fighter pilot, which is a weird, like, kind of nerdy thing that sounds like to say, but you're really like in control of a car, and you're just the road. It's like a sports car, you're in it to win it, and it's definitely a lot less comfortable than this, but you know, it's the purpose of the car. And with this, weep, 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 weep. This, you have like almost the perfect hybrid. Continuing on with this interior, most of the materials inside are pretty nice, to be honest with you. They do make use of this like wrinkled whatever the hell this is called, and it's shitty. The seats are actually a 10 out of 10 in my book. I talked to you a little bit about those earlier. I guess I don't need to go into more detail. Leather and suede with the nice little SRT inserts, perfect. But why in the world are there back seats? Like, it doesn't make very much sense to me. One of the things about driving this car that is actually really weird to get used to, but I got used to relatively quickly, was the idea that the blind spots are awful. But from what I hear, You know, other competing cars also have issues with the blind spots. The car does have those little blind spot detector things that light up when somebody's there, which are really helpful. And honestly, they make driving it just absolutely normal. I don't know if it's an option or standard on one of these cars. This one has it. I would absolutely not recommend buying one of these cars unless it has a backup camera, because you will back this into some guilt ish. Thank God that this thing has the backup camera, because honestly, on a scale of 1 to 10, you can't see a out of the back window, no matter how hard you want to try. Performance-wise, it feels like it has enough power to make it fun to drive. If you're buying a car like this and expecting it to be super fast, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But it does have the 470 horsepower, 470 foot-pounds of torque, which makes it a blast to zip around in. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that comment, but it really is what it is. There's shops like my friends at High Horse Performance that take these things and modify them to the moon and make them super fast. For what it is, though, it is a pretty quick car. I do have to give it credit on that front, as it seems to pull the weight along nicely. I'm gonna have to look up the weight, because that's one thing that I didn't look up, and I'm gonna stash that on screen right here. Another thing that I found really cool and kind of blew my mind with this car is that it does have the different custom settings that I was telling you about earlier, that now I can't find. Okay, that's cool. So we have SRT drive modes. So we have settings for traction, suspension, and steering. They change a lot. I never driven a car, honestly, with these custom kind of tweakable settings. And once I started digging into them, I was like, wow, these actually do something. I always thought it was kind of gimmicky and weird, but they stiffen up the steering a lot. So like it gets super responsive. Same with the suspension. You can feel, I've been driving with it on sport or street. I think sport is the standard setting when you turn it on. And then I've had it in street, and it really softens it up. But when you put the suspension in track mode, the suspension gets real tight, and you really feel everything in the road, which I can see how that would help if you were going on a track. The Brembos really stopped this thing, by the way. I guess that they figured because the car is so heavy, they had to put some serious brakes, and when you combine that with the wheels, which are wide as all living ish, you actually have some pretty good stopping power. One of the things that I had to get used to the most was not the way that the clutch is. When you drive a new car with a clutch, you have to figure out where the engagement point is and all that stuff. The thing that I had to get used to the most, you were towing way too much with that Jeep. Like, what is going on with me over here on this side? Like, just look at this. One of the things that you really have to get used to with this car is how much these brakes just want to stop it. You touch them and it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Last but not least, I guess one thing to mention is in terms of usability, there is plenty of space in this car for me. I can actually see myself daily driving something like this, believe it or not. 2 people could ride comfortably in this thing with room in the back seat for whatever you have going on. The trunk is pretty spacious. On the Sopranos scale, I'd probably give it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Get the shovel, Chrissy.
You could definitely fit like, I don't know, 5 or 6 adult-sized bodies back there. Overall, I have to say that I am a GM guy when it comes to performance stuff. I've always been, you know, had the Corvette. I've had multiple Corvettes. I had a CTSV. You know, I'm doing the turbo truck thing now, the Silverado. But after driving this, I just have to say that I'm completely blown away. It might actually put the Challenger in some sort of top 5 list if there was actually one of those that existed in my head out of cars that I've driven. And I definitely would consider buying one of these, especially with the stick shift. It's just so much fun to drive while it's heavy, and you know, the stick shift might slow it down a little bit. This guy is like riding my ass. There you go, buddy. while it's heavy and heavy stick cars don't necessarily work that great in terms of drag racing, which is something that I love to do, this thing is an absolute blast. And as kind of like a commuter car or a regular driver or a weekend driver even, it's just so much fun. And the fact that it's so well rounded makes it even better. I was comfortable getting lost in Nashville for like a couple hours and then hopping on the highway for another hour. If I were to give this car a rating out of 10 stars, it would be at least a solid 8, which is very good. I don't think I would rank any car that I've ever driven a 10 out of 10. But in terms of, should I buy this? Should I stray away from it? If you're thinking about it, get out there and test drive one. These are awesome. Driving this really makes me want to get behind the wheel of a Hellcat or a Demon. Anyways, guys, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate all the likes and subscriptions if you enjoyed this video, that is. If you didn't enjoy this video and you hated looking at me, let's hear about it in the comments. I'm always willing to have a conversation. Also, if you have any questions about my experience with the car, feel free to leave those down there as well. Thank you guys. I appreciate you watching. This has been Big Clive 34.